We had some questions that were asked prior to the webinar, and I think we're going to answer those as well. At the end of this webinar, as a follow-up, you'll get an email from us that will give you a link to this video so you can watch it again on YouTube. It'll give you a copy of the presentation itself and any relevant facts that are really there. First question that comes into place is it says, how will the upcoming amendment on this year's ballot affect medical marijuana if passed? And so I think the ballot initiative here in Florida is really has to do with Amendment 3, which is a state amendment here in Florida. And that is a question of whether we want to have adult use cannabis legal here in Florida. And actually, it's a bill that has more than just, do we want adult use legalized? What it has is some things built into it that make it kind of an interesting bill. I'm not going to get into that because we did a webinar on it last week, but I do think that you need to think seriously about whether you want to pass Amendment 3 or not. I'm very much in favor of legalizing cannabis. I'm not in favor of a lot of the conditions that are in that particular bill, especially not allowing home grow and destroying the hemp market. But I think there's a difference between the two. The federal schedule is one thing, the state schedule is another. Your thoughts on that, Manny?
I completely agree, Mark. One thing that I like to point out on this is in both, as you and Amy stated in the presentation, it's very important to stay in touch with our legislators, not just to drop the ball as soon as the vote is counted and done, hopefully in favor of. However, we still need to make sure that they're passing the right regulations and bylaws to make sure that we're getting the access that we want. And if not right away, at least it paves the way to be able to attempt again later down the line.
Sure. I think that's something that's really there. But I do want to separate, and I want to make sure it's clear. The federal rescheduling to Schedule 3 is one process, and I want to mention that the Amendment 3 here in Florida is a separate process just for the state of Florida for adult use. So there's two different processes that are being put in place.
And also to answer that, the related question, like you said, Mark, as with the federal part of it, it's going to take months, if not a year or two, before everything and all the dust settles. Same thing with the Amendment 3 here in the state. I say yes, you would still need a medical card, at least initially right away. But then after everything's said and done, same thing with federal taxes, pharmacopoeia versus state or federal versus state. There's a lot of different nuances that go in on this. So that's why I like to suggest stay tuned, follow us, and make sure you get the most up-to-date information.
Sure. And again, on Amendment 3, which is the state amendment, I do want to make the comment. In the amendment, it basically says that the requirements or the process has to be put in place here in Florida 6 months after it's been passed. That means it'll be end of May, beginning of June before you'll see anything. However, it's been clear that people like DeSantis in the state of Florida have said they were going to basically file lawsuits against that particular amendment. That could tie that up in court for a year or two. And what I'm trying to point out is if you're a patient who uses medical cannabis to address your medical condition, please keep that card and keep it up to date, because while this process is being put in place, unless you have that card, you will not be able to buy medical cannabis to address your condition. And again, if it gets this delayed for a year or two, you definitely are going to need that card. I don't think you want to wait 2 years to be able to address your condition. Your thoughts on that, Manny?
I completely agree. I've already had multiple conversations with clients and consumers about that very issue. And again, to your point, Mark, if or when it does pass, if you're not knowledgeable enough and you want to wait, by all means do so. But it can take and will take some time before it does pass.
Sure, it's there. Let's jump to the next question, and I think it's a good question. It says the most important thing to me is to keep big pharma out of the cannabis industry. How does big pharma benefit from scheduling, or is this an actual positive? First of all, big pharma is working overtime to get into the cannabis industry, trying to buy companies and doing different things. It's going to be hard to keep them out, but I do think that if part of this bill allows us to have smaller players and medium-sized players get into this business, that's going to be really key. The federal rescheduling to Schedule 3 does allow and does open the door for smaller companies to get involved, and also is something that is not favoring big pharma. It's favoring mainly a lot of the smaller businesses and people that really need help that are out there. So it's a positive overall. I'm not in favor of having big pharma in cannabis, And I think that this particular bill makes a major step to being able to open the doors for basically this to be an open market, which is what we really want. Manny, your thoughts on that?
I agree with you on that, Mark. I'd even go as far as to say big pharmacopoeia has had their hands in this for years now, if not decades, with synthetic variations of marijuana, such as Marinol and Epidiolex, Marinol being more THC and Epidiolex being CBD, amongst others. So they're going to be involved, and it depends on how you look at it, like you suggested, Mark. If pharmacopoeia has their hands in it, that means insurance will be able to pay for it. It'll be regimented for those who want it to be as regimented and not as freeing as finding your own regiment. So it's got pluses and minuses. It all depends on who you are, what you're looking for. And just as we always suggest, marijuana and cannabis is significantly different or can be significantly different for each individual. And because of that, the same goes for how you're treated with it as well. Some
Sure.
people need their hands held to go through it, which is perfectly fine. Some people like to dive in and try to figure it out on their own, and some people are just not enough to navigate it. So it's all based on your needs.
Yeah, it was really interesting. I do want to point out, if you're concerned about big pharma getting involved in the cannabis industry, I will talk about the Florida Schedule 3 amendment. That opens the door. In fact, it is putting a large company in charge of the cannabis industry here in Florida. That is a clearly a act, just like the tobacco industry and just like the alcohol industry went in and put legislation in place to legislate for themselves. This is a very similar thing here in the state of Florida. One of the reasons why people are opposed to it is because of the fact that it is opening the door for one company to take over and control the state of Florida with respect to the cannabis industry. So something to pay attention to. I'm not trying to tell you how to vote. I just want to make you aware of the facts on that particular situation. Manny, we have a very good third question here, which is, why were cannabis and marijuana plants originally made illegal? Candidly, up until 1937, and Manny, I'm going to have you chime in on this a little bit, but candidly, up until 1937, cannabis was part of the pharmacopoeia, or part of the doctor's medical practice, to be able to use cannabis. In fact, it was estimated somewhere between 24 to 31% of the products that were being used by doctors at that time were cannabis related or hemp related, let's put it that way. What ended up happening was a number of industries, specifically oil industry and the paper industry. The paper industry, which was being most things were being printed on hemp paper at that particular point in time, was actually wanted to go to cotton. So the cotton farmers and everything, they banded together, and what they did was, this was a political move to get cannabis banned and keep it from being a product that could be used. Goes back to, again, big industry, big companies wanted to control this particular industry. Now, I do want to point out they did use excuses like the fact that that marijuana was being used by immigrants. But in reality, this was a total move to use that as an excuse to be able to control the industry by big companies, and they were very effective in doing that. Ironically, though, even though they did make hemp illegal, we needed hemp ropes during the war, and really the whole implementation of that program really didn't come into place until after the war. In fact, almost in 1950. Now, when it was deemed to be illegal, and this was in the 70s. Robert Schaefer, who was the actual head of the DOJ at that time, was commissioned by Nixon to do a study. What he did was he did a one-year study on cannabis. The objective that Nixon had was to show that cannabis was this bad drug. What ended up coming out of the study was exactly the opposite. The recommendation was not to schedule it at all. It was not a gateway drug. In fact, it was a drug that was being used by the medical industry very effectively, and should in fact be kept as a product that was, how should I say, open to the public. This was an 1,184-page document that, by the way, was buried by Nixon right after that, and wasn't opened up. It wasn't released back to the public until Obama came into office during his regime. But the bottom line was, this was a political move to really buy oil, buy cotton, and buy alcohol to be able to restrict this particular drug. Now, Nixon had the chance in 1972 to make this not schedule it, or basically make it a Schedule 3 drug. Remember that at that point in time, he had a problem. He had the Vietnam War on, and he was getting a lot of protests from that. And he also had a major race war that was going on at this particular point in time. He saw cannabis as a way of using this particular substance to be able to go in and prosecute people that were he felt were not in line with his thinking. And so therefore he made it a Schedule 1 drug. Now, here's the problem. Making it a Schedule 1 drug ended up literally affecting the lives of thousands, if not millions of people that really could have got relief, that really didn't get relief. And it was interesting that Ehrlichman, who was one of his supporters, actually people that were in the cabinet, came out years later and basically said, "Did we know it was not a drug that was illegal or should be illegal?" And they said, "Yes, absolutely." They knew exactly what they were doing. They were politicizing this, and they were ignoring science, and they were ignoring what even their own DOJ had recommended to do. So that's kind of a little bit of a brief history. Do you want to add a little color to that, Manny?
You kind of covered it all, that every point that I had except for one. One point that I noticed and that I read on was along the same times, a little bit earlier when the hypodermic syringe came out, is when it started pushing marijuana out of pharmacopoeia, because it was a faster way to get the medicinal into your bloodstream other than tinctures or inhaling smoke. So that was a big push, and that's what it ended up turning out to. If you look back at your history, especially if you're suffering from chronic pain and otherwise, where you get cortisone shots or otherwise, why are we going that way when there's other options like a topical with a natural product in it that may and more than likely will offer support and alleviate pain rather than getting an injection and possibly doing more damage? So definitely politicized, definitely a moneymaker to push marijuana out, because it was also very cheap to manufacture and easy to grow. So yeah, you covered everything else that I wanted to say there, Mark.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's really key is when you say it's very easy to grow, a lot of people, especially here in Florida and not across the United States, want to be able to grow their own cannabis for their own use. I know this is one of the things that the veterans are very hot on, is being able to really cut the cost of this down for so these people can control and have the medication that they need. Just like they grow vegetables in their gardens that they so they can lead a healthy life, they're looking at doing the same kind of thing. I think this is one of the issues that the veterans are having.
Absolutely, I agree. I talked to many of them at the same time, and honestly, to be quite candid, most of the time I kind of give them a little pushback on homegrown. Not that I don't support it, but in the sense that I say it's easy to grow marijuana, but to have it unadulterated is not as easy. A lot of people think that they can just grow it like a regular vegetable, which you kind of can, but it's a very absorbent plant, if you will, where it takes everything out of the soil. So getting it from good sources, which most people statistics are showing are pulling from dispensaries rather than the street nowadays, is very important, because you know it's all natural. It doesn't have pesticides, heavy metal, mycotoxins, and such like that. So there is a process to it. It's not as easy as I make it sound. It's just easy if you know how to do it.
Well, easy to grow, a little bit hard to process. And again, you got to make sure, like any natural product or organic product that you're making, you have the right soil, you have the right environment, and you have the right conditions to be able to do that. But that's really not the issue. The issue is you should have the right to do that. And unfortunately, our legislators believe we work for them rather than they work for us. It's time for us to vote in legislators that have that know that they work for us, not we work for them, and give us the right to be able to control our own destiny. Um, I'm being political, I'm sorry, but that's just kind of a feeling that I have. I think we've covered most of the questions that were submitted ahead of time. If there's anybody in the audience that has a question, please let us know. Hopefully we've covered this particular topic. We'd like you to understand why both of these are together, why they have to be linked together. It's not a matter of just Schedule 3 and the DEA saying, yeah, it's Schedule 3. It's a matter of make sure the legislation is in place. And this election is very important. We need to put representatives in place that will pass that particular act or a version of that act that really changes the laws, because without the laws being changed, we're still in the same situation we are right now. That's really out there.
I agree, Mark. You're in the same industry. I'm sure you see it all the time where people are really fighting and pushing back on the or rescheduling and trying to push for deschedulization. I would love to see it descheduled, but at the same time, there is a need medicinally out there for those who are really suffering or don't have the quality of life they're looking for. Which is why I'm a big advocate of rescheduling, and then we can work further to get it descheduled. That's just a very personal opinion of mine, being what I see out in the industry now as far as patients and those in need.
Mhm.
But it's a step forward. I agree with you, Mark, and I'd vote for it as soon as the ballot comes up.
Sure, I think it's there. Well, Manny, I want to thank everybody. I want to thank you very much for helping me tonight. Any final thoughts?
No, I'm just happy to be here, Mark. I hope that we reach some people. If you were here, thank you for attending. And if you know anybody that might be interested who wasn't, whether it was the storm or just work or otherwise, please share. We love to reach out and get this information out to people. You can find me at the bluntjoint.life. You're obviously finding Mark here at Medical Marijuana Aware. So again, thank you, Mark, and I really do appreciate it and hope everybody has a blessed evening.
Yeah, and I want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I know that with a hurricane, it's a bit challenging. And I did want to have this because I want to put it on record both in YouTube and also have it on video that we can go forward so it can be shared, as you mentioned, Manny, because this is a very, very important act. So I want to thank everybody for joining us. I know it's with the weather condition, that's a tough decision, but thank you very much. And I want to thank our moderators, Lee and Leah, for really being in the background, helping us coordinate a lot of this, and also for Alyssa, who is the person who came up with the idea of this webinar series. We have more webinars coming up. In October, we're going to be talking about a number of different topics, including terminology on October, early in October, on October 9th. So please join us, and you have a safe, more importantly, everybody have a safe weekend. Stay safe from the hurricane, and hopefully this won't be as bad as everybody projects, but we're safe and we got time to prepare. Great. Thank you
Absolutely.
very much for joining us.